like he would show me a vision and he started speaking it to me. And I was just like, I was just watching it going, oh my goodness.
What was he showing you?
And it was like he was showing me the vision. He was showing me what he was going to do. He showed me where the enemy had come in, and attack people. But then he began to show me what he was going to do. And then he started giving me the scripture that tied into what he was doing. So, and I was just watching. It was like he was. And here's the interesting thing. And I think it might answer some of your questions that you had earlier, I think. I don't know. So, but as he was giving me the vision of the word, he would take a piece and he'd put it in here. And he took another piece from over and put it here. And it was like he started like building this thing from different layers and different layers of revelation through the word and revelation and the Father's heart. And he was just like, so anyway, it's probably going to take me a little bit to explain all of it. But he started out by talking to me about the different... And I'm not saying us, but I think the church as a whole has really looked at the church as... And God purposely speaks to me about platforms. Addressing me, just the church and the whole thing of the platform ministry. And we think, and so it's created like a wrong identity of ministry as opposed to family. Mm-hmm. And even where Adam was to walk with dominion in the garden, he was to tend the garden. And I feel like God is raising up people, anointings, giftings, callings, and really has been speaking to me about kingly anointings. And he said, don't despise the day of small beginnings. Mm-hmm. Because he took me to the place, I had the encounter where I was in Louisiana, I come up from this meeting, and there literally is a wise man sitting on the couch in my room. It's not in the spirit, there's a manger in front of him. The Lord started speaking to me about kingly anointings that are about to be birthed on the face of the earth. And he said, I'm releasing wisdom to acknowledge and to raise up and honor that which I'm giving birth to. So, but it had to do with kingly anointings, and it really had to do for the purpose of going back into and God keep calling them platforms, because He's establishing each one of us. There's a platform that He's going to put us on, and we're going to have a harvest message into that platform. So God is going to give us, I would say, a place of, He's going to put His honor on us. He's going to put His favor on us. And for no other reason, and He is going to begin to promote people. But here's the thing, your message of weakness right now is going to be your harvest message and the message of overcoming. And so He began to speak to me about these platforms. And it's the platform of government, of finance, of business, of education, of media and entertainment. God is beginning to take over. The church vacated those places because we're too holy, we can't touch the unclean. And God said, I sent you in there to bring healing to the sick.
That's
exactly I sent you in as a doctor. What's that?
That's what Caesar said yesterday.
He did? Well, you know what? You know why I didn't go last night? Because I knew he was going to talk on some things, the Lord was going to have me talk on it, and it's not that I don't want to be unteachable, but I really limit like what I read, because I don't want to have to struggle. I just don't want to be in that place of like, oh, did I read that? Did I hear that? And so I like being in a place where this is what God said, and I don't have to go through any of that mental gymnastics. So,
wow.
So
that's also Caesar said too. A lot of that.
What do you mean by harvest message?
It is. I think there's a harvest that's coming. I think there's two things that are coming. I think Malachi 4 is about to happen. The spirit of Elijah has been poured out in the past. We've talked about that. The spirit of Elijah has been poured out, but we used it to start ministries. We started it to, how would I say, we wrote books about it. We made conferences about it. We fashioned it in the way we thought it should look. Does that make sense? But there's something different that's coming. I feel like it's not just the spirit of Elijah. I think it is Elijah is coming with the Father's heart. And everything that's about to happen, the Father's heart is going to be at the very core of that. The reason is we focused on ministry is because of wrong identity. When you have right identity, when you know who the Father is, you move in sonship and you become family. We have functioned out of an orphan spirit, and we try to build things up to protect ourselves from that sense of abandonment, from that sense of being alone. And so we built walls. This is my territory, don't come in. And so God is changing the identity back to sonship, but it's the spirit of Elijah is coming, but this time God is going to make sure. It's almost like God's going to hang on to it. He's going to keep it in his hand. If that makes sense. But here's how he showed me he's going to do that. And I'll get back to that harvest message because it'll make more sense. He began to speak to me about raising up people that would, out of Isaiah 58, that they would build on the age-old foundations. They would be repairers of walls broken down. They would be repairers of the breach. And we talked about it. We were talking earlier. Man's attempt to build what they thought God said has built foundations where they've built walls where there's no foundation, and they don't line up with the foundation of what God intended to build. Usually man, in his attempt to try and accomplish what God said, will limit. It's always smaller. It's always, how would I say, less impactful. And usually when that person is gone, that vision dies. But when it's God's vision, and you can tell something that's apostolic in a sense, because when it's planted, it's God. And God doesn't let it die. The person can go to heaven and God keeps breathing on that. He will raise someone. So you can tell something that's apostolic because it will go from generation to generation. So the Elijah thing, the Malachi 4, turning the hearts of the children back, the fathers back to the children back to the fathers. That speaks of restoration of marriages, restoration of families, but it's restoration of generations. The Lord told me, gosh, I don't know when this was. It was back like 2000 maybe sooner. The Lord told me, he said he wanted there to be a joining of the generations. He said, I'm going to establish a bridge between the generations. And so there's a lot in that. So there's brokenness within the lineage. There's a brokenness of identity. So that broken identity leads to low self-esteem, and we see ourselves as less because we don't know who our Father is. So the Spirit of Elijah is coming to heal that, heal the identity of the church, so that we can be like Gideon. We're going to quit hiding in the wine vat and trying to accomplish what we thought God said, and come into true identity because of knowing who He is, which then enables us to step into the harvest field. And that's the thing in the book of Gideon. It says, and they came down year after year and stole their harvest. Our harvest has been stolen year after year, generation to generation, because of wrong identity. And part of it, God's going to heal identity between the father and the children, and amongst ourselves, and establish identity of family.
Yes.
An orphan, and so Gideon was in that place. He had an orphan mentality. We no longer go out with our armies. You have abandoned us. There was a spirit of abandonment was on him. So an orphan spirit can never give birth to family. It'll always give rise to works mentality and self-protection, because an orphan. So that was. So anyway, I want to go back to Isaiah 58. Is that? But here's what the Lord showed me, and so here's the message. So what the Lord showed me was, in your weakness, He is going to begin to manifest His strength. And so what the Lord showed me was, wherever in your life the enemy has come in like a flood, God is going to establish His throne in that very place. He is going to manifest his strength. He is going to manifest his kingship. And it's almost like he's declare that, when you take a land and said, I declare this for the king of, wherever. So this is mine. And I will share it with no other. So here's where the Malachi 4 thing comes in. He will share it with no other because he is going to inhabit that place. He is not going to give the glory to another. And so your harvest message will be, ministry is never what we do for God. Ministry is testifying about what God has done for us. That's true ministry.
Yes.
And so, in this week, I was weak, but the enemy began to come in like a flood, and he stood in the gap for me. So here's what I was. I was sitting there, and I saw a wall that had been broken down. I saw a gap in the wall, and he began to speak to me about being repairs of the breach. But then it was just the craziest thing. I saw him become there was different phases of it. I think we're going to experience different phases in this process. I think he came and he rebuilt that breach, that broken place, and filled it in. And then the enemy started cutting that flood, like a flood waters against the wall. You could feel it. It was just like, whoa, is it going to hold? And I felt like the Lord allowed that to let us know what he built is going to hold. It's like, what he has restored in us. Our weak place, where the enemy came in like a flood, he is rebuilding that place. And then here's what I saw, and I didn't understand it, but it's the stuff I don't understand so blesses me when I figure out what it really means, because I know I didn't know what it meant. So he comes, and so the flood comes again, and he takes a shield, and he just jams it in the ground. And then this time it was like the wall didn't even feel the flood. It didn't even feel it. And then I saw him take his right hand, and it's like he took his hand and he planted it in that, it's like where the rebuilding was. He put his hand in that place. And then, so then I saw these two hands that had been cut off. They were smaller hands. And it kind of reminded me of like Jezebel when they threw her down and all that was left was her hand, And I was just like, oh, what's that? I mean, it looked creepy, And it's like the Lord took those and he planted those outside of the wall as a testimony to his overcoming. And it was almost like declaring war of the enemy not to ever try that again. It was almost like David with Goliath's sword. It was a trophy. It wasn't just a trophy, but it was a declaration of God's victory on his behalf. God did what he said he was going to do. And here's the thing, then these demonic hands of this demon that had been defeated, and God stuck them out in front to show any other demonic warfare that it's like the Lord had overcome in this weak place, now is made strong. And the Lord inhabits that place. And I saw these sprouts begin to sprout up out of the ground. And I thought, oh no, that demonic thing's going to manifest, he's multiplying. But what happened was there was these oaks of righteousness began to spring up everywhere.
Amen.
And by your testimony through your testimony, the Lord is going to begin to share with others, equip others, mentor others, encourage others, and they became oaks of righteousness. And the oaks of righteousness, it's like they became a wall. And then the Lord put his fire. That's, I think, is the next generation. That's turning the hearts of the fathers to the children. So that's the children. So God is going to put the heart of the Father on all of us, turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. The children are going to become oaks of righteousness. And then I saw a fire from heaven come and touch these oaks of righteousness, and they just exploded into this blaze of fire. And it was like, and then the Lord took me up into heaven, and it was just like I was looking at from a heavenly place, and this fire was raging, and I heard the Lord say, and the light will shine in the darkness, and the darkness will not overcome it. So it was almost like through our testimony, the declaration of I am weak, but he manifested his strength on my behalf in my weakness. And it's like, and then what we impart to others and we share that with others. And two, where we, in Revelation says we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. It's like our testimony is going to become an overcoming message. And so that the sharing of that testimony is a declaration of what he did for us, if that makes sense. So anyway, then, so I'm watching this all happen, and I'm just going, and then he speaks Psalm 18 to me. And so I go to Psalm 18, and he shows me, and so Psalm 18:35, and he said, you make your saving help my shield. Mm-hmm. And your right hand, which is what he puts in that place when he rebuilt that break, it was a right hand, and he said, and your right hand sustains me, and your help has made me great. So where I was once weak, I declare his goodness. He raises us up. He puts us on a platform to share our testimony of what he did, and it becomes a harvest message because it breaks off hopelessness off of those that have no hope. And we say, I know he can do it for you because he just did it for me. And we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And so the whole, that Psalm 18, he just began, it's like that's exactly what he did. It's like he put a shield in front of it. He put his right hand to sustain us, to hold us up. But yet he put a declaration out in front of, it was almost like a declaration of war. It was like where he cut off the hands of the enemy. What he showed me was, then he began to speak to me about the hands. It's like in some Eastern cultures, if you get caught stealing, you get your hand cut off. So that was a declaration of steal no more, and I will allow you to steal. So what's been stolen from each one of us, because the enemy that has exploited those weak places, now has become a strength, and so the enemy can't steal from us anymore. And so God is what he's declaring, I am going to restore what's been stolen. And this will be a declaration of my restoration. And your testimony will be that not only have I healed that broken place, but I have restored that. I have brought that back to you. So it's like there's a restoration that's gonna happen and take place. And then that becomes our harvest message. That whole thing, and it all began with our weak place. It all began with our weakness. God is going to manifest his strength wherever we are weak, and it will be a testimony of his victory through that. And what he showed me was that when you're experiencing warfare and pressure, that is nothing more than it was in John 16:33. He said, "Do not fear the world, because I have overcome." Amen. And so that pressure is just pushing you to where the keyhole is. So there's a door of opportunity. There's a door of promise. There's something there that God has said, this is yours. But it's behind that door. And so then the warfare comes, and we think the warfare is trying to stop us from getting through. Well, it might be, but you know what? God turns all things around for good, what the enemy means. So he'll take that pressure. The keyhole's over here. It's over here. It's over here. The keyhole is John 16:33. Do not fear the world, because I have overcome it. He's trying to help us. Jesus is trying to help us. He'll give us the grace to find the place in the midst of that darkness, in the midst of the heaviness, in the midst of the warfare, where he has overcome that very thing, so that he can manifest his strength through our weakness. And so the key is, so we talk about the keys of David. The keys of David, I think one of the things that is that he believed that God is who he says he is. That God was going to do what he said he was going to do. God anointed David king. David meets the giant on the battlefield. David reads, one of the things, he can't kill me because God says I'm going to sit on the throne. I'm not king yet. This guy can't kill me. because I can't be dead and fulfill God's promise, and I believe God to be true. And so I think the keys of David are believing that Jesus is who he says he is, and he's going to do what he says he's going to do. And even in the midst of the darkness, even in the midst when the giant is standing in front of us and saying, not going to happen,
Yes.
gone, my God will find a way. I am weak, but God's going to manifest his strength through a young little boy that had no right to be on the battlefield with a seasoned warrior giant. There were seasoned veteran fighters that would not go to that battlefield. And they had seen battle. They knew what battle was, but here was a shepherd boy who was, from their perspective, was weak. He was small. He was insignificant. He was the day of small beginnings. But he said, I believe that God is who he says he is. And so he faced that giant. And in that weakness, it was almost, you could almost call it a manifestation of weakness in a sense, other than David's faith. David's faith was in God, but his natural ability wasn't much there from a warrior standpoint. But he said, I believe God is who he says he is, and he's bigger than my shortcomings. He's bigger than my small stature. He's bigger than my inability to know how to fight a battle. And I'm going to trust that he is. I fight you in the name of the Lord. I'm going to trust that you are who you say you are. And so that's the key. So you take that key of the faith that he is who he says he is, and you find that place where he has overcome and say, so that was Gideon. Gideon didn't want to go to the battlefield. I am the smallest of the least of the tribe, and you no longer go out with them. So there was an orphan mentality, a spirit of abandonment, and he had a low vision of himself because he didn't know how big God was. He didn't realize at that point God could overcome any weakness that's in him.